So now, on to the program. It's my great pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, who, due to his great work and reputation in the community, and I owe him a big favor for coming in today to do the keynote. We really appreciate it. I just talked to him on Wednesday, so thank you, Jonas. But he's well known for driving successful talent development and workforce solutions and being a key thought leader across the globe in these solutions. So I'd like to invite Jonas Priesing to join me at the podium, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julia. I'm delighted to be here and also talking about corporate culture at Manpower Group. So when you hear a topic like that, I'm sure that your eyes are now rolling into the back of your head. You're thinking, oh no, here comes a lot of pontification about the outlook on life. But when Julia asked me on Wednesday to come and address this group, what our thoughts are at Manpower Group, what my views are, this is something that is ingrained in who we are as Manpower Group. So for me to come here and talk a little bit about this is easy from that perspective. Because it is how we keep together operations in 80 countries, how it would feel similar to you if you walked into an office in Peru, in Lima, compared to what it would be like if you walked into an office in Germany or you walked into an office in Mumbai. It is the glue that keeps the company together. And of course, all of us will have a view of what corporate culture is. And I'll come back and I'll ask you for some ideas and some thoughts that you have. And of course, I'm even more excited about, the great panel discussion that's going to happen after this initial presentation that Betsy will lead with some great panelists. But maybe as a starting point, so it is what if you look this up, corporate culture, you can see that this is one of the definitions, which is the closest one, which I will refer to. So when I talk about corporate culture, this is what I mean. So it's a shared set of attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or an organization. So in normal speak, it's what characterizes the organization in the sense of what we feel is right as a company, who we are, and what it is that we do. So it's deeply ingrained in how we go about running our business and why we're passionate about working in our company. And if you want to think about this from a external perspective, when I think about examples, so this is an example. It's one of the ways that you can describe, and many of you, I'm sure, have your own ideas of what corporate culture is all about. But this is one that is commonly talked about as a model. If you want to go to YouTube, you'll see a presentation by a guy called Simon Sinek, very famous. Renee is nodding her head. That's great. So many of you have seen this illustration. What it means to be to have a corporate culture that is founded on fundamental beliefs in how you want the organization to behave and think about. And those organizations tend to be organizations that at their core have a very clear idea about why they're here. What is it that they do? What is their fundamental belief system? So earlier you saw a video that was narrated by Thelma on United Way. So United's way, why, its purpose from the beginning is to help those in need in our communities. The what is the organization that enables, or the how is the organization that enables that connection, that purpose to become reality. It's an ecosystem. It's got the United Way organizations with their great team that is directly affecting the organizations that need the help where it's needed the most. And the outcome, so the what, is what the results are. And I think that we have Mary Lou here, we've got Brian here. All of you have seen the impact of the United Way activities either through their direct funding or their volunteer activities that has an impact in our community. So it really colors it what an organization is all about. So can you think about organizations that have been talked about recently that have had issues with their corporate culture? Uber, yes, that would be one. All right, so it's all, you can think of all the ones that have had a problem. Tell me a company that has a culture that has been built into competitive and winning advantage, for instance. Yeah, Manpower Group, thank you, Julia. Bonus points to Julia, right there. Very good. Think about Southwest Airlines and how they compete against United Airlines. So do they fly different planes? No, they fly 737s. They only fly 737s, so they have operational advantages, but it's the same plane, unionized, still serving, having to manage passengers that have certain expectations. But if you talk to the folks at Southwest, they will say that they are building their culture as a competitive advantage because the experience that they want to provide for their customers is based in the belief that flying should be fun and it should be a great experience. When I think about going on Southwest, that's my expectations, and that's why I prefer flying Southwest if that's the experience I'm looking for. Most of the time, I fly with United Airlines. What do you think their objective is with flying and why I choose to work with them? I fly with them because they go to all of those 80 countries, but my expectation is not that I'm going to necessarily have a fantastic experience flying with United Airlines and certainly not be arriving on time to most of the destinations that I fly to. But it has other advantages. But so corporate culture can be extremely important, and I think it has to be seen, and we certainly do that at Manpower Group. We see it as part of the glue that holds the company together, that provides it a very clear focal point for what it is that we're trying to do, but not only to do good, but also to do well as an organization. Because we believe that we're in a very dynamic environment and highly disruptive environment. So we want to ensure that our company has a very strong core in terms of the why, but that it enables us to flex the how and the what. Because we know customer preferences are going to change, consumer and candidate preferences are going to change, so we have to go through a lot of change as an organization all over the world all the time to remain competitive. So our intent is to build our culture as a competitive advantage in the industry in which we compete. And I'll come back to what it is that we're trying to build as the competitive advantage in a little while. But how that manifests itself is, I think, best illustrated in our video that is going to go on just about now.
We believe employment has the power conversations with students across the globe so they can be ready for work and make their own mark. While we've helped strengthen the skills of workers, we've helped open the doors for refugees seeking asylum throughout Europe so they could lead a better life with richer opportunities. It's why we've been elevating the role of women in the workforce from the beginning, because we believe a woman's place is wherever she wants to be. It's why we've been teaching automation and software skills to millions the world over, because we believe time waits for no one, and neither does technology. And why we've been preparing teenagers entering the workforce, leading them down the path to success. Because we believe the world rests on the shoulders of the next generation. We believe that meaningful, sustainable employment has the power to change the world. Because he did. And we still do.
So To be successful at Manpower Group as a leader, you have to believe and be driven by this. You know, your sole purpose in Manpower Group cannot be to make money and deliver your bottom line results. You also have to believe that we have a purpose and to celebrate that purpose. And that's what we use videos like this for, to ensure that our organization understands that for all the millions of people we put to work every year and all of the skills that we are able to provide them, that we never forget that providing meaningful and sustainable employment has the power to change the world. So whilst our objectives have always been to be a high-performing organization and make sure that we make the progress that we have to do and be for all of our stakeholders, we can never forget that what we do has a fundamental impact in the communities in which we live and operate. So as a leader in Manpower Group anywhere in the world, part of your work is not only to run a great business and deliver awesome results and be the number one in each market in which we compete, but also to take into account that you need to ensure that you are helping the communities in which we operate. Because in the end, just as I started when I talked about United Way, if everyone isn't participating at a reasonable level to the wealth and prosperity that is being generated in a community, that community will not be able to fulfill its potential. So we know that working and living in a healthy community is good for our business. So it's symbiotic. But we then also have to pay attention to the work that we do to ensure that those communities are healthy and do our part to making that be so. And that is an important role of the organization. And I can tell you that it's a very, very strong glue that is very motivational for our employees to understand that doing well and doing good at the same time are not mutually, are mutually inclusive. They're not exclusive. They're symbiotic. And I'll come back to some of it, what it means in terms of becoming more competitive as an organization as far as Manpower Group is concerned. But it is also extremely important for us to have an anchor as an organization so that we're able to navigate an extremely dynamic and uncertain external environment. So as you can tell, over time as an organization, if you think about how we started and how Elmer and Aaron started our company 70 years ago, offering one service primarily in the US. Today, we are a global company operating in 80 countries under very different situations and circumstances with lots of different services and solutions. The how and the what has changed fundamentally and dramatically and will continue to evolve and change. Because we as an organization have to evolve and change to remain competitive and be able to serve the needs of our clients and serve the needs of our candidates. But at the same time, we have a core that is fixed, that our employees can look at and say, all right, okay, so a lot of things are changing, but this is clearly an anchor, and this is clearly what Manpower Group is all about, and I buy into that, and I think that makes it the organization that I want to work with and have a career in. And I think that is eventually, how companies need to think about their own corporate culture. I'm sure you've heard of the saying, the famous saying by Peter Drucker that culture eats strategy for lunch. And what he meant by that is that you may have a strategy, but if the strategy does not work with your culture, you either need to address your culture or you need to at least navigate it and try to bring out the strengths of your culture so that you can enable your strategy. Because if the strategy is going head on against your culture, you're not going to be successful. The 70 or 50% failure rate of acquisitions, for the most part, is based on lack of cultural fit. The money part makes sense, the financing part makes sense, even the market share logic makes sense, but if the culture isn't a good fit, in many organizations means talent will leave, clients will leave, and that's the acquisition failure rate, and a lot of that is believed to have to do with corporate culture. So then, of course, when you think about this in the context of where we are today, if you want to think about questions within your organization, we think about this all the time. These are some of the questions to think about. In our case, having a talent strategy that's aligned with our business strategy, so to be able to align the talent, that we bring talent in and retain talent, is a huge component of our business success. So making sure that our business strategy is aligned with our talent strategy and that our purpose is visible and clear to everybody that joins our company is a huge driver of business continuity and market success. You know, being able to describe the essence of what it means within your organization, what the culture means, is really important, because in that way you're able to put it against your strategy, and you're able to measure whether it's reinforcing your strategy, whether it's neutral to your strategy, or it's actually opposing your strategy. And that's what a lot of companies are talking about, especially in disruptive times, how they need to change the culture. But cultural change is extremely difficult, but it is generated and led from the top, no doubt, but it's disseminated all across the organization. And certainly, so changing it is not done very, very quickly, but you know that your culture needs to adapt because it needs to reinforce your strategy, not go counter to your strategy. And then, of course, in our case, thinking about our culture, is our culture built for learnability? So this desire for continuous learning. We believe that we're living at a time of many shifts. So to have an organization that learns from its behavior, that anticipates change and believes that change is good and can be productive as an individual being part of an organization and as a whole, and seeing it as a positive as opposed to seeing it as something to be feared, is extremely important to us, because we're trying to drive strategic agility and speed to market. And therefore, our organization needs to be built in that way, and our culture needs to be supporting that, and learnability and drive for performance are really aspects of the desire and ability to learn from an organizational cultural perspective is extremely important for us to be very successful as an organization, you know, for many years going forward. And then the last point is, of course, are you able to leverage, is your culture standing in the way of the strategy that you're trying to implement? Are you aware of your strategy and what the culture is going to do? Is the culture going to be receptive to any change in strategy that you're driving? Understanding how that works out as you're trying to, and of course shifting the strategy of the company to adapt to changing market conditions is extremely important. So all of this to say that to us at Manpower Group, our culture is at the core of how we drive a successful business. We celebrate our purpose. We celebrate it all across the organizations with videos like this in different languages with different members of our leadership team, conveying this message that we're driving significant change. We're going to help our clients and candidates win during this time of great disruption, when skills are what's going to make companies and organizations and countries successful and competitive. But within all of that change, understand this: our purpose has not changed. This is who we are. This is what we believe in. If you see a lot of change that does not support where we're going, support our purpose and what we stand for, then raise your hand. But know that all of the change we're doing is done within the specter, always, of believing and reinforcing our purpose. So that's, of course, part of where we go when we are thinking about diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion to us comes from a fundamental belief that including diversity of thought is going to help us drive better business outcomes. It also is part of economic growth. We understand including everybody, especially in countries, but really at all times, when access to skilled talent is going to be scarce, is a very logical and important step to take to drive prosperity and economic growth. So we need to do everything that we can, externally and internal, to ensure that we have diversity and inclusion as a core component of how we drive our talent strategies, because it's going to be great for our business, but it's also going to serve our constituents across our communities where we live and operate. So that's a brief overview of what and how we think about corporate culture at Manpower Group, what I think is the basic tenets of a complex topic I'm sure that many of you are thinking about as you're thinking about changing your organizations, navigating a disruptive environment. Because I'm sure that, as you drive some of those changes, from personal experience, I know that one of the first calls I'm going to get from somebody negatively affected by changes we're driving is to say, well, this is not part of the values. This is not the deal we signed up for. This is a change I wasn't expecting. And that's when a clarity of purpose and being able to say, no, this is exactly what we're doing. We're driving our company forward. This is why we're doing it. This is how it's very coherent with everything we've done in the past. And those are some of the changes that are coming because of those choices that we have made. But with that, I think we're now getting close to listening to a whole panel talk about corporate culture and, Rich, why just having a foosball table may not be all there is to corporate culture. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
And I just want you to think for a moment, reflect on how fortunate you are to be here at the University Club today, hearing Jonas give this presentation, that you did not have to fly United to Davos, to the World Economic Forum to hear it. You've got to hear it here today. So thank you again, Jonas. I think you provided some really great context and certainly some very thoughtful directions as we're starting to talk about corporate culture and how it can drive or how it could hurt talent attraction and development. So with our panel today, joining us, we have Grady Crosby, who's the Vice President of Public Affairs and Chief Diversity Officer and President of Johnson Controls Foundation. Helen Davis Johnson, Vice President of Strategic Investments, Quicken Loan Community Investment Funds. Paula Pennebaker, the CEO and President of the YWCA of Southeast Wisconsin. And Rebecca Kowalski, Vice President, Workforce Strategy and Solution Integration at Manpower's Right Management Group. And to moderate the panel, we have our own Betsy Brenner, the former president and publisher of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Welcome.
Well, thank you all, and thank you, Jonas. We couldn't have asked for a better prelude to this panel today. Corporate culture is the glue that holds the company together. Think about that as you hear from our panelists. And you see why Manpower is such a recognized leader in building the kind of workplaces that lead to strong cultures, innovation, high retention levels, and the effective recruitment of talent. We're so grateful for his comments. So yes, for the third time today, Rich, culture is more than a foosball table, as many, many companies have learned. A great corporate culture starts with what we've just heard, top leadership. It flows through the sense of purpose that employees feel, the values and the people that make up the organization. An open and inclusive culture energizes. It motivates and empowers a workplace, and it continually attracts the best top talent available. We've talked a lot today about the places that got it wrong. Just ask Uber, Wells Fargo, or yes, United Airlines, how a hierarchical structure, a lack of internal collaboration, or a tone-deaf tone at the top can lead to a toxic culture that scares away talent, customers, corporate partners, and shareholders. On the other hand, when you look at the list of the most admired companies in the U.S., companies like Apple, Starbucks, Nordstrom's, or even our own R.W. Baird that continually makes the top of the list of the best places to work. They all have in common their ability to attract the best and the brightest. They recruit the best diverse talent, and they do it because of a reputation for collaboration, inclusiveness, and openness. Well, today you'll hear from a talented panel of leaders from both this community and others whose companies' strategies demonstrate how to attract the best diverse talent and how to create a corporate culture that others want to share and emulate. They're here to show that talent attraction and retention in particular is not a one-sided linear strategy. It's rather a sound talent development plan that can help drive competitive strategy, impact the bottom line, and yes, grow your business. So I'm going to ask our panelists to start by briefly introducing themselves again and telling you a little bit about what they do and where corporate culture fits in with their responsibilities. Grady, why don't you start?
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank the GMC for inviting me here today. Looking forward to this opportunity to present to you. Again, my name is Grady Crosby. I lead the public affairs at Johnson Controls. I also serve as our Chief Diversity Officer and also lead our foundation. In the Public Affairs group, I have everything from groups that deal with all of our global government relations initiatives, all of our sustainability initiatives, community involvement and engagement, and as I mentioned, diversity, which includes workforce and supplier diversity. So some of you already know that Johnson Controls has kind of been going through a few things here lately. So if you're not change-minded, if you are not adaptable to change, we're probably not the best place for you. The old joke goes that JCI stands for just change it. So we keep it very interesting. We've gone through a series of corporate acrobatics lately, and it's been really key and critical in all of that, especially with the recent merger with Tyco, a fire safety and security company that we made sure that the organization did not lose that sense of purpose that Jonas talked about. So it really started at the top with our management team really trying to create a very clear, focused vision around why we were doing what we did. And what would be exciting about the fact that both of our companies were better together than any one company individually. So for me, it immediately began to spring through our diversity and inclusion group, because in creating that vision, we also wanted to make sure that we had some input into culture from the legacy groups, if you will, the legacy Johnson Controls groups and the legacy Tyco groups. And in doing that, we heard from a lot of our mid-level management folk. We heard from a lot of our people leaders, but I also wanted to make sure that we included our leaders of our business resource groups so that we can be ensured to have some diverse thought, some diversity in terms of perspectives in the room at the same time. And it was very enlightening, because although we're very similar with regard to culture from Tyco and Johnson Controls, we still have some stark differences in how we looked at things. And I'll give you one example. This pin that you see Johnson Controls people wearing is something that we've worn with a great deal of pride and a sense of shared values, and everyone understanding that if you put on the pin, there is a like set of operating principles that you come under. The Tyco folk, when they saw that, the first thing they asked was, are you guys members of some cult, or you're kind of cultish around this pin? You everywhere you go, you have this pin on, and we're just not all that into pins. So even having discussions around that. The other place where it shows up for me in terms of corporate culture is in our community involvement and engagement and our foundation work. I like to tell people that it's that part of our work that really creates the hands, the touch of a company. In essence, the corporate entity is just a legal entity with super rights and responsibility. We can't go to jail. We live in perpetuity. We don't have to participate in jury duty. And with all those super rights, we think that we have some super responsibilities to the communities in which we serve as well. And it's only through those groups that we get to really touch. And that creates a corporate culture as well. But we have a number of, so I just wanted to start with that piece of it. We have a number of great panelists, and I want to yield the time to those and their perspectives as well.
Well, Helen, welcome. We're glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about Quicken Loans Foundation and Rock Ventures.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Thank you. Last time I was up here, as Julie mentioned, I was here in a different capacity, having worked for a private foundation, and it's really great to be able to talk about corporate culture because it has a lot to do with why I jumped ship from a national foundation and went to work at Quicken Loans. The culture there is well known. It's something that really does stem from leadership. We've had incredible visionary leadership in our founder, Dan Gilbert, and in the CEO, Bill Emerson, that ran Quicken Loans for 25 years, and now Jay Farner, who's running it. And we feel very, very fortunate to have had from them the incubation of what we call the isms that are deployed across the company and the entire family of companies, for that matter, over well, every time you wake up, right? So we have isms that really help make the guiding decisions that we engage in every day. Things like we're obsessed with finding a better way, which is why over and over again there's innovation that's happening at every level of the company. It's why we're rethinking the way that we do our mortgages as well as the way that we invest in the community. And in fact, this morning I was sharing with some folks that has made us very successful in mortgages, but has also been the reason that we're reimagining how we invest in the business of cities. And a lot of that is engaging our 17,000 team members. And we feel as though they are absolutely the deployment of that culture. We are the they is another one of those isms. And when we send our 17,000 team members into the community 70 times a week to do what amounts to about 125,000 hours of volunteer time every year, we know that they are thinking about that ism. We are the they. They're thinking about how to make the world a better place and how to put themselves in other people's shoes and to be obsessed with finding a better way as they engage with nonprofits across the community to help them with their business planning, to help them do everything from stacking cans to reorganizing the way that they think about their own business and operations. We feel as though that opportunity to engage our team members is part of our talent retention plan. It's what makes working there an incredible experience because you know you are having a transformative impact in your own community. That's something that we're really proud of. You know, we'll talk a lot about what some of these isms are, but I will share with you that we print 25,000 isms books every year. And every few months, Dan himself leads ISMS Day. And over the course of every year, over 500 other companies that are external to us engage with us in that training session where you deeply engage in what it means to think about taking the roast out of the oven, which means let's make this stuff happen, right? Let's wake up and do this stuff quickly. It means thinking about how you're doing the work, what kind of questions you ask yourselves, and then how you engage in the community. You know, it also involves slushies. I'll be honest with you, we have a slushie machine on every floor, and we do think that it's important to have fun with the work. We've got bright colors in our offices. We have an environment that is conducive to collaboration, to working together, and to thinking in really different ways, and that's become increasingly how we think about the space around our offices too. It's why we've invested in how to reimagine parks and public spaces in downtown Detroit, because we see that as much a part of our offices as we do what's happening inside the sort of four walls of the office. We know that it's what creates a vibrant community, and if we want to make Detroit a sticky place for people to live, it's also got to be a sticky place for them to play, and that's what makes them get up and come to work and be excited about that job every morning. I think there are a lot of things that we can talk about. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. I think that private capital is really what will change the way that we think about the way we work together in this country. It is what will change our communities and our culture, and I do believe that we have a responsibility, much to what Yona said, to make the world a better place, and it starts right inside of our shop.
Great, thank you. Paula Pennebaker.
Thank you, Betsy, and thank you, Julia, for inviting me to participate. I'm here with a different perspective. I work for YWCA Southeast Wisconsin, and one of our great efforts is trying to help people find jobs. I was particularly moved by Jonas's slide that showed Manpower's purpose of being committed to meaningful and sustainable employment that has the ability to change the world. At the YWCA, we know that a job can do just that for an individual. So I'm here to talk a little bit today about the report we did, Community Readiness Assessment, entitled Bridging Employer Readiness with Worker Willingness. It was an assessment to look at how to respond to the question of how ready employers are to hire workers with little or no soft skills and spotty work histories. One of the reasons why we landed on that as a question for the report is because we had heard for years people talk about the fact that people just don't have good soft skills. And one of the greatest outcomes of that, from my perspective, was the fact, or I should say the realization, that employers have incumbent workers that don't have soft skills. So a part of what creates stickiness for people in getting jobs is the ability to come into an organization where they are treated with respect and dignity as individuals so that they can be successful. So that's what I bring to the party today. Thank you.
Rebecca Kowalski, tell us about some of that glue that keeps the corporate culture intact at Manpower.
Oh my goodness. Well, I have to follow Jonas, which is an unenviable task on the best day. But so I lead workforce strategy for Right Management, and a lot of my work has been very specifically looking at skills and role evolution. And it ties very neatly with what Jonas was talking about. So we are in the midst of a significant skills revolution. When we talk about digitization, we are talking about a brand new era for all of us. And when we surveyed employers around the world, 18,000 of them in 43 different countries, they said, 90% of them said digitization is going to impact us, and 75% of them said it's going to require new skills. When you look at how significant that evolution is, and you think about all the people that could be left behind, I think when you get down to the root culture of our business, which is uncovering people's human potential and helping them understand how they can uncover it themselves and how they can cross that gap, and our role in helping them to do so, you start to see why our people are so committed to that. No one needs to be left behind. But this rapid evolution, particularly, we've been looking a lot at the manufacturing sector, requires a pretty clever pivot by organizations in their culture as it relates to how leaders lead, how they're open, how they're fast, how they look at talent as a sustainable resource as opposed to looking at it from the perspective of, well, hey, if these people don't work out, I can move them. In fact, they're renewable and they're sustainable, and that's an obligation that we have. That's a significant shift that we have. The fact that we're going to have to move faster than ever before. So individuals have to be adaptable, leaders have to be adaptable, and so do organizations. And so our work has been looking at, not only how do we help our customers make that shift, but how do we ourselves inside of our business need to be prepared for that same shift? What things do we need to do differently so we can help a greater part of the population participate in meaningful and sustainable work on a global basis? So that's what I'm bringing to this conversation today.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll open it up to the entire panel, and let's just start with a comment. Briefly, what do you think are the most important drivers, or the single most important driver of corporate culture in an organization? Grady?
So 1, 2, 3. So a couple come to mind immediately. One is alignment. Making sure that everyone is singing out the same song book, everybody's on the same page, everybody's on the same foosball table, however you want to talk about alignment. And the way you have to get that done in an organization our size has to be very intentional. We have a footprint of about 150 countries, 120,000 employees. And the second thing I would mention in terms of being very important to instill corporate culture really impacts an organization with that footprint is creating excitement around the vision. Because if you don't have excitement around your vision and where you're going as a company, you can have the best culture and the most dynamic people, but it's still a ho-hum work environment because there's no excitement about where we're going. So you have to be doing something exciting, not only as an organization, but you also have to be mindful that there is something in it for the individual to win at as well. Because we get all, especially from leadership management standpoint, we get all caught up in where we're going as an organization, and we're marching through this, and we're going to be the best of this, and we're going to outpace our competitors. But if I don't have anything in it for the individual contributor, it's going to be very difficult for me to get everyone on board with that message. So organizational goals are great. Teamwork, in fact, one of our values is all around one team. But if we don't recognize the contributions and properly reward and recognize the contributions of the individual, that entire structure runs a risk of toppling on its head.
Ellen, what's the one thing that drives corporate culture?
Really, I just get one?
You can have more.
I'm just kidding.
I do too.
No, so first of all, I agree with everything that Grady said. I think what you said was absolutely right. So what I would add to that is that it has to play out on a micro and a macro scale. And to be clear about what I mean is that your culture has to be authentic. It has to be something that seeps down into the details of how you do the work. And it also has to be how you envision making progress on the really large, innovative things. So it's important to make sure that it's translating in multiple ways and that it's also easily grasped, right? One of the things that we say a lot is that you have to gump it down and you have to make things so that they're easy to understand and easy to act on. So I think that has a lot to do with what makes it really, really sticky inside an organization. And I think you had asked about diversity and inclusion, so I just want to wrap it into this because when you're really being authentic, I think you are honoring and respecting people across the community and within your organization. And we have worked really hard to think about our diversity and inclusion strategy and have hired someone to actually run point on that and set up a team and think about what we need to be doing differently to really make our enterprise an inclusion machine. At the same time, thinking about how our procurement strategy also is an authentic way to express our culture. So as we look at our huge vendor spend, we're looking at how we're actually intentionally buying from entrepreneurs across the community and from as many neighborhoods in Detroit as we possibly can, and really are interrogating what that vendor spend looks like right now and have brought on another director to get up and carry the water on that every day. And so no matter where you sort of push and pull in a company culture, I think you have to find reinforcements or reinforcing examples of how that culture is playing out authentically.
Thank you. Paula?
I think I heard in Helen and Grady's comments a couple of things that rang true for me. I think when you think about success with diversity and inclusion initiatives and organizations, is authenticity is key. I think different people can express support for corporate culture in different ways. Everybody doesn't have to behave the same way to be supportive of the culture. So if the expectation is that diversity is you have to walk like us, talk like us, do as we do to show that you fit and that you are in lockstep with us and our beliefs and our culture, then you probably aren't going to have very much success. But people can believe in what you're doing and what your organization is all about and the mission and not express it in the same way. So I think that acceptance of people that you bring into your organizations who are different in however you define difference for your organization is really key. But authenticity in dealing with people is a must.
And I think, so that's so beautifully put, and I think a lot of the authenticity comes from having the why. So Jonas showed that very simple diagram, but really ratcheting down on that why and making sure that's really pure and that's very clear is the difference between having a culture that kind of shifts and moves with time and something that is timeless regardless of what disruptive forces are coming. So I talked about digital before, and a lot of you are living through this right now, but if your why is clear, your what and how can change a bit, but the why never changes, and it's easy to continue to drive that authenticity. And by the way, there's a lot of room under the tent for the why, because you're involving people from a diversity inclusion perspective on how to solve it. Going through those other outer rings, the what and the how, because the way we do our business on a global basis in 80 different countries, there are a lot of things that are essentially true, but each country has a tremendous amount of autonomy. Each country's context is different, their culture is different. But if you went and talked to a branch manager in every country, they would tell you that what puts their feet on the floor in the morning is that opportunity to connect someone with a job, that opportunity to help someone find their dignity, that opportunity to find their potential and connect them with the tools and resources that'll take them to work. And so the way they may do it is a little bit different, but that essential why, I would say that's the most critical thing to get right in your culture.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question of the panel, and then we'll open up for questions from the floor. And Helen, I'd like to ask you, Rock Ventures and Quicken Loans Association work with hundreds of companies, thousands of partners throughout the upper Midwest. how do you model and set a standard for the kind of corporate culture that they could have by following your example?
I think that's a lot wrapped up in the isms, right? It's why we print 25,000 every year, so that we can share the isms book with all of those partners. And it's why 500 companies come and share that experience with us every year. I also think it has a lot to do with us sort of practicing what we preach, right? So when we are out in communities doing community engagement, or whether we're working professionally with partners, I think we're living that culture and we're talking about it, right? So most interestingly, and probably an example of this, is I had a really great meeting. We were in New York recently meeting with a group about how we could work on homelessness in Detroit and across the country, because we see it as one of the most critical issues for vulnerable populations. And the first thing that we did around the table was to share values. And one of the ways that I think we knew that they were going to be a good partner with us is because of their shared values. They went around and said, well, here's what we espouse as an organization. And it was in lockstep with our isms, right? It was just a few different tweaks on language here and there. So I think there are multiple layers of how you have to express that. But I think there has to be real intentionality in inviting people to the table and having that conversation, whether it's in, a forum of 1,700 people who are attending ISMS Day, or whether it's, around a table of 10, and sharing what those values are. And I think it's also making sure that we express externally how we recognize and celebrate success that is associated with how people live those values. One of the things that we have internally is called the Cheese Factory, and I'll explain what that is, but it's a way for anyone across the company to share an idea and see if it can be brought to fruition. So you can email an idea to thecheesefactory@quickenloans.com, and someone will get that and they will send it to whoever needs to see it, and then it will be acted on or not, but you will get a response. And one of the most successful cheeses that ever came across the desk of the Cheese Factory was called Rocket Fiber, which you may not have heard of yet, but you will, because it's a new internet provider, fiber provider in Detroit, and all came from an idea that someone felt comfortable expressing to our founder because of that mechanism inside the company.
Let's open it up to any questions that any of you in attendance may have. And there is a microphone to help us hear you. Omar's got one. Can we get a mic over there to him, or can you speak so loudly that all of us can hear you?
I can speak loud.
Okay.
Let's start by saying, Grady, you're looking good.
Thank you, Omar. Omar's my personal trainer. Thank you.
That being said, how does health and wellness fall into your organization's life?
It's a critical part. I think it's a part of the, as we've been talking all day today, a part of our culture in terms of, being ready to bring your full self to work. We know that we have a very unique opportunity that's in front of us right now, and I shared this with someone not too long ago. We also know, though, that means that we have to be very expeditious about the way that we go about it. And so part of our culture is that in just about each location where there's a critical mass of people, as you would expect, there's going to be health and wellness facilities there, so that we can kind of integrate into your life. This whole work-life balance is something that we all, have some shared responsibility in as well, and our job, especially as employers, is to make those choices and opportunities as readily apparent and available as possible. Is what I was going in terms of the fact that we have to move expeditiously on this opportunity is because we understand that the opportunity of a lifetime, which we're sitting on, can only be seized within the lifetime of the opportunity. So everyone has to be ready. Everybody has to be ready to, and that's mentally, physically, the whole nine. I wish, and as a side, that Helen would share with me one of Quicken's books of isms, because I think they're absolutely fascinating. You guys printed 25,000 of them, so you certainly...
I'll get you some.
Okay, fantastic.
We'd all love to have some.
Right. Gump it down and get the roast out the oven and all that kind of stuff. One last thing, not related to Omar's question at all, but that's, I just thought it was fascinating the way that we went about it. It kind of goes to what Helen talks about in the whole ism theory as well, in terms of the ism sessions. Because we were creating something new, one of the ways we had to try to get some alignment around it was to have have some mapping sessions for culture, some cultural mapping sessions. And through those sessions, we were able to come up with a comprehensive dialogue explaining the why, the what, and the how, all in one place. And our goal over last year was to take 30,000 of our associates through those cultural mapping sessions to do just what we've been talking about today, trying to instill what this new culture of Johnson Controls was going to be. And going forward, that process will be included in everyone's new employment orientation, what have you. But companies are coming up with all kinds of ways, innovative ways to reinvent themselves. And once they do, getting that message through and cascading that through the organization is critical for it to be sticky.
Deanna?
This question is most likely for Paula. We've talked a lot about organizations that have tens of thousands of employees. But Paula, you work for a local organization here. I don't know how many employees you have, but I probably not 17 to 150,000. How do you, I mean, people think that, yes, you're a smaller organization and your grassroots and culture would just naturally happen. I don't think that's the case. How can you create a successful culture with an organization where you don't have multiple offices, you don't have 10,000 employees?
I don't think it's different than an organization that's really large. I think I go back to Jonas's presentation. It's right now at the YWCA, I think we have 50 employees. It is a complete immersion into the mission of the organization and the work that we do, and understanding among everyone who works there the importance of that work and what their role is in it. So we have a very diverse workforce. It mirrors the population of people that we serve, and people are very committed to the mission, so they go about their work in serving with that commitment in mind. So it's having a real thorough understanding and commitment to the why we do what we do.
Dan, real quick.
Okay, real quick. C-suite always thinks the culture's great, they believe it. How do you test it? Do you do anonymous surveys of your employees? How do you really know the culture is, from the standpoint of the average employee, really what you think it is?
We
One
don't,
answer, everybody.
well, I'll start. We don't test it with employees. We do with people we serve. And the people we serve, in their comments about how they are served, reflects the positive nature of the culture. I think that because the work we do is very stressful, serving people who are in extreme poverty is not necessarily fun. But when people are committed to doing a good job at that, it's reflected in their work, and the people who we do survey in terms of our service delivery feed that back to us.
And I'm going to wind us up because we're at time. Thank you all very much to our panelists. Great contributions, great interaction. Thank you all for some good questions. And Rich, you want to send us home?
Yes. Thank you, Betsy, and thank you to the panelists. You did a great job today.